So let's talk a little bit about tonal transcription. On the IPA chart near the right bottom hand corner, there's this little section for transcribing tones. There's a few different ways that this is done. So one is to use these diacritics over the vowel. To be honest, I don't see use of all of these usually. The ones I actually see people use usually are this one, so this acute accent for high tones, this grave accent for low tones, and sometimes I've seen this one for rises. So you can think of this little hot check or check mark as well. First, you have to start low, so you have to sort of hit this low first and then rise. Um, so what did he sound like? So if you just say it's a high tone, then that generally means a high and flat F0. So this would sound like ma. This guy, the low, if it is flat, it would also sound something like this. Ma. Well, that got a little creaky, but it could be creaky, but let's try again. Ma, ma, or something like that, versus ma, ma. um, and then the rise would sound something like ma. So those are the diacritics. This other system, these are called tone letters. Um, and so the way they work is there's this vertical reference line which represents the speaker's pitch range, and the total range is divided typically into 5 levels. So the bottom, um, maybe also you can think of it as level 1 as low, 2 half low, 3 medium, 4 half high, and 5 high. So usually, for instance, people might say for high, this is level 5 here, the top of the speaker's pitch range, mid-level at level 3 over here, and then low 1. There might be a little variation in how people treat this little difference between high and extra high. Extra high, extra low, those are pretty rare, so people in practice might draw this line pretty much at the top, even if they're indicating high. Let's look a little bit more at this numeric scale. So I mentioned, or let me mention that these tone letters were first proposed by Zhao in 1930, and so here's actually some screenshots from his paper where you can see for here, if we have 1 1, we're at the bottom, so that'd be like a low, like ma. And then here's 3 3, so that would be like we're staying in the mid range, like ma. And then if we're at 5 5, we're at the top, that might be high, like ma. And then you can see there's also cases where you might have F0 rising and falling. So here's an example. If we have 2 4, then it's rising from this half low to half high. So that's what it looks like. That might be something like ma. Um, Compared to this big fall across the entire range from level 5 to level 1, that might be something like ma. You can also get more complex things where you have not just a fall or a rise, but maybe a rise fall or fall rise. As an example, let's just say this one 3 1 3. That would mean you start mid, then you drop to the bottom of the pitch range, and then you come back up to mid pitch range. So it'd be like ma or something like that. And then let's say instead you have 3 5 3. That would be first you start mid at level 3 and then rise to 5 and then drop back down to 3. That might sound something like ma, ma, like that, where you have a rise and then a little fall. So that's this 5-point scale, which is also corresponding to what we're showing with these tone letters. So big warning though, you always have to check the transcription conventions as stated by the author because there is variation in how people do this. So for instance, people who work on Asian tone languages, they tend to use a 5-point scale with 5 indicating the highest F0, just as I've stated in the previous slides. Americanists who work on languages of the Americas like Ottoman languages, languages of Mexico, they actually invert the scale. So if they're using those numeric numeric transcriptions, then they actually use 1 as the highest F0, not 5. Um, Africanists, so-called Africanists who work on African tone languages, they are more likely to use diacritics, like we saw here, like this high tone diacritic, but sometimes they don't mark the low tones. Or sometimes they just use HML for high, mid, low. So that's just an overview of tonal transcription. And so then one question is, how do you input these funny symbols? And let me show you, I think I mentioned this before, but there's this fun web browser keyboard. So, oh, one last thing though is we've talked about breathy and creaky. These are the diacritics for those. So for breathy, breathy, right? So there's sort of 2 dots under it for creaky. There's this kind of tilde underneath um, whatever is creaky. And so, yeah, let's take a look, like, how do we enter these? So if you go to this website that I've just mentioned, it's really neat. They have the IPA chart, so we could scroll down and say, oh, okay, I want to have ma. I'm typing here, but I want to have a rising tone. So actually, let's type the ah, and then let's say, oh, let's use a tone letter. Oops, that looked a little funny. There we go. There's ma rising. Or we could have ma where we type the ah and then I say, ooh, I want to use that rising diacritic. Yay! So now I can see I've got that diacritic. Suppose we have a creaky ma. Then I can go to where the diacritics are, type m, ah. After I type the ah, let's click on here for creaky voice, and now I've got that. And I can just cut and paste these into whatever document I want.